Hi everybody, just before we get going, I've just had an email to say somebody's struggling to get through, so we'll give it a couple of minutes before we start in earnest. Okay, so we'll be with you in a moment. So, hello to everybody and welcome. My name is Barry John Graham. I'm one of NQA's regional assessors. I hope that I find you well, and whilst you're obviously looking forward to the weekend, of course, you're at least ready to delve into a topic which I know and hope is close to home for many people at the moment. So today, as it suggests, we're going to examine business continuity. Specifically, we're going to look at ISO 22301, which is a business continuity management system. As suggested in the title, is an initial look at the standard in broad terms and provide an understanding of what the standard is. There will be a brief look at some of the technical requirements of this standard, though the scope of the webinar is not a comprehensive implementation guide. Fear not. However, we are working on that one and we'll be with you soon. So let's continue into this presentation and examine the standard in detail. So there you can see, if you haven't seen my face before, we've put a name to the face for this one. And the information you probably need to take away, more importantly, is on the left-hand side there. There is a facility to engage with questions on the webinar, and if possible, I'd like to keep that until the end of the day. I will answer any question that you raise, and we'll just address that as we conclude the webinar. Most important of all, you will receive a copy of this slide deck and a recording of the webinar once it's complete. As always, if we power through something you'd like to dwell on a little more, for example, then you can do so once you've got the copy of the slide deck and the webinar. My email address is on the screen there underneath my face. So if you want to reach out at any point in the future, once you're reviewing this webinar in your own time, then please feel free to do so. So you may have received some information from our marketing team on the scope of this, but on the screen now is an approximate guide to the next 25 minutes or so. Ultimately, you can see here there are a number of topics to fit into the webinar. So without further ado, let's start with the top one. Who are NQA? NQA is a world-leading certification body spanning the globe. The map shows you there we are amongst the very best in terms of certification, including being #1 for aerospace in the Americas, #1 in the telecoms and automotive sector globally. We will help our customer to deliver their products and services. Excuse me. NQA have been doing this for over 30 years now, and during that time we've issued over 50,000 certificates globally. Once a customer uses NQA as a partner to achieve their goals, we will establish a long-term relationship in most cases, so you can count on us. So what is 22301? So since its initial release in 2012, ISO 22301 has made a dramatic impact on how business continuity programs are designed, managed, and continuously improved. The standard provides a coherent approach to developing a business continuity management system. It uses straightforward language, hopefully, and helps organizations to understand at least the minimum requirements for effective business continuity, and more importantly, ensures holistic preparedness for all types of businesses, and that's regardless of size or sector, for example. It would be fair to say that 22301 has successfully guided organizations in establishing and development of their business continuity programs. It's introduced a common language for organizations to discuss business continuity planning, processes, and capability. In 2019, so last year, 7 years after that initial publication and in compliance with ISO requirements for updating previously issued standards, the ISO Technical Committee, with responsibility for 22301, issued its second edition. And that's the version in use today and as very recent as it suggests. And there's a little guide towards the end of the presentation about what that means for people who have this already and what that means if you're coming into it brand new. So why do you need ISO 22301? So preparing for a disaster or operating resiliently, trying to scan the horizon for threats is something we've all been doing for as long as we've been here, basically. Some of the worst things that can happen to your organization or us as individuals are beyond our control, okay? None more so than the pandemic we're living through now. However, there is some things we can and should be doing. And this is where 22301 comes into its own. It allows all organizations an opportunity to plan for the future by reflecting on what their primary business aims are and taking steps to protect them and ensure that they can recover when they're operating against an event which requires resilience. I'm often wary of tick boxes, but simply the benefits of 22301 cannot be overstated. Those with an ISO system in place understand the benefits of having a management system, or having a business continuity management system as a whole heap of new things that you perhaps may not be familiar with. It's an easy thing to point out. Organizations who've had a 22301 system in place or made provisions along those lines before this pandemic hit us, ultimately, and we've seen that, have responded better than those who perhaps didn't have a business continuity plan in place and didn't have a management system to continuously test and improve that. A question I'm often asked relates to ISO 27001. Those familiar with 27001 will be aware of the requirement to implement business continuity arrangements, a part of the control set for risk which has been identified. Although it is a great risk control mechanism in 27001, it doesn't specify continuity of critical business functions or services as a requirement. It's more specific to information infrastructure and requires the addressing of IT assets and their support services to the business processes. 22301 requires a greater scope and approach and ensures that an organization identifies, as again, critical business functions. Those functions are then resourced accordingly, and a roadmap back to functionality after an event is put down into place. Information security considerations will naturally be folded into that process in the 22301, which again is more holistic in approach. So there's some brief advantages and differences between 27001 and 22301. But what is 22301? Let's take a look at that. As stated in 22301, at the very first clause, the intended purpose of this standard is to enable organizations to protect against, reduce the likelihood of the occurrence of, prepare for, respond to, and recover from a disruption when they arise. And they do this by the establishment and improvement of a business continuity management system, BCMS. ISO 22301 is a requirement standard, and that's composed to enable it to be audited and to demonstrate compliance to key stakeholders, third parties, and customers, for example. However, perhaps the primary driver behind ISO 22301 was to allow organizations to realize increased business continuity performance and ensure resilience and recovery during times of stress. As you go through the standard, remember it's written in a manner that introduces topics so the wording is applicable to everybody, and that's regardless of geography, size, structure, or purpose. And that includes, government, not-for-profit, as well as those in the private sector. In other words, the content is high level, you could say, and describes the what and not the how. 22301 describes business continuity planning concepts using straightforward language that can be used by anyone in the organization, okay? And that doesn't have to be a specific job title. So regardless of experience or job title, ISO 22301 enables anybody who is tasked with leading business continuity planning within an organization to understand business continuity concepts. It's not just those who are new to business continuity and not exclusively used by the most experienced planners. It's designed for everybody who operates in a risk mitigation or risk control role within an organization, and that is associated with stress or disruption, for example. 22301 is all about long-term continual improvement, which is the theme of ISO management systems. With this as a focus, the risk of treating business continuity as a one-time action greatly decreases. It's clear to planning participants and stakeholders that their top management, that recurring action is necessary to enable alignment with priorities and the expectations of interested parties. So again, you can swap your plans with other interested parties and you similarly have a 22301 in place to ensure the confidence of supply chain is met. Overall, though, the standard was developed to address some of the most significant obstacles that recur in business continuity performance. Specifically, the clarity and purpose of management engagement. So yeah, it's a top management driven approach. So it exposes risks and exposes some key critical business functions and their resource requirements in times of stress to top management to enable decisions to be made long before reaction is needed. So I said at the start there'd be a very quick look at some of the technical aspects of the standard, and what I've tried to do in this is bring together the plan, do, check, act cycle, which hopefully a lot of people will be familiar with. Those with an ISO system already in place will absolutely understand the headings of each of the clauses shown on screen. What I've done is sort of highlight there clause 8, and that contains information you may not have ordinarily have come across when you've implemented either 27001 or perhaps 9001, for example. So the operations area in 22301 differs slightly to other things, whereas obviously the plan, the check, and the act elements of this are familiar to those who already understand ISO. So the first 3 clauses of the standard provide a background information regarding ISO 22301. Then clauses 4 through to 10 define the business continuity management system. Unique requirements of 22301 are in the do phase, as we've said there. Within this area, there are a number of specific requirements which contain terminology you may not be familiar with, but ultimately is easy to understand. You would only have to read it once to garner some kind of understanding of what is required. And if you logically follow 8.1 right the way through to 8.6, you can kind of see what is required without delving into more detail. Once you've identified that this is what you want to do, the next thing is committing to the BCMS. I will outline a very broad example of 8.2, conduct of a business impact analysis, on the next slide. And this addresses one of the most commonly asked questions, although it clearly doesn't give away a solution which you can take away and implement yourself. As suggested right at the start of this presentation, this is designed as an introduction to show you some of the features and the benefits of 22301. There will be an implementation guide which goes into greater detail about implementing this in your system, and that will be released soon. So please do keep in touch with NQA and their webpage to ensure that you don't miss out when this comes around. So impact analysis. So what is a business impact analysis? It's a requirement. One of the first things you have to do when you get into the do phase is conducting a business impact analysis. And it's a critical step in developing a continuity plan. In this phase, you are required to identify critical business operations, functions, or services. Additionally, you're required then to consider related resources which are needed for employees to perform those functions. The specifics are set out in the standard. Please, at all times, use the standard if you have it to ensure you cover all the considerations which are outlined. An effective analysis at this phase not only identifies these resource elements, it also employs data which allows you to prioritize business continuity efforts. Continuity efforts may present themselves on a scale. At one end, you may have what you might call an inconvenience, which is something undesirable but ultimately manageable. At the other end is something disastrous, which causes possibly irreparable harm. So when you're conducting a business impact analysis, you need to make distinctions between the two ends of the scale and everything in between. Naturally, every single organisation and the departments or subheadings within should feel that they are the focus of recovery and based on the importance to their organisation. However, if you identify them as an inconvenience, but something manageable, and you try and resource all of those inconveniences, you will have a drain on finite resources. And that brings the need for data into the equation. When you're conducting your business impact analysis, there are no template solutions which apply to every organisation every time. That's why time spent planning and understanding what you want to continue in times of resilience requirements is so vital. It also allows you to generate a fully customised plan and mitigate risks against that effectively. When you're developing the impact analysis, you look at each department, team, and/or area of your business. As you do, as we've suggested, you need to consider 3 areas. One is the timing or duration of an outage, its operational impacts, and its business impacts or financial impact, depending on how you want to look at those things. And that's how I've structured the table up on the top there. So, for example, if a function can't continue operation for an hour, a day, or a week, you've got to identify how does this impact service delivery. For customer-facing areas, the impact can be measured fairly easily, but in other areas, the cost might not be apparent, which is why I've used business impact rather than financial impact, because you might need to consider other things such as reputational damage, employee relationship, your relationship with vendors, and any regulatory obligations you have. Don't just assume costs. In most cases, information will exist to provide something quantifiable to populate your business impact analysis. Think about it long before you're required to bring it. So there's a very, very quick preview of conducting a business impact analysis. The reason I picked on this is it's perhaps one of the critical step in the whole process is identifying this kind of focus your efforts here, and the rest of it revolves around. So as mentioned previously, this webinar doesn't have the scope to act as a full implementation guide yet. However, this is something that's coming. So for today, let's move on and let's look at something else, such as the benefits of implementation. Hopefully, you've already understand the benefits of certification in general. Some of these are consistent across the piece and included in other standards. Some are unique to 22301. Again, I'll stress from recent experience from auditing organisations with and without 22301 or 27001 business continuity in place, there's a notable difference in the effectiveness of recovery plans from those who had a plan in place before and those who did not. I think that alone should encourage at least exploration of implementation for your organisation or for your clients. So is certification right for you? The standard may be right for your organisation if you need to demonstrate to those inside and outside of your organisation that you can overcome operational disruption and provide continuity of service or productivity. If that sounds like something that you would benefit from, then yes, absolutely, certification is right for you. There's not many areas that consideration of continuity when bad times come around is something you can ignore. So ultimately, in some respects, it's the confidence that 22301 brings that you can continue to do what you do in times of increased resilience requirements is the benefits kind of scream at you. They stand out on the page. So how do you get certified? So now that you've been introduced, what to do next, and that information is on screen for you now. Please don't worry about the notes so much in this slide, because the webinar, as indicated, will be provided to you once the presentation is ended. But very quickly, it's a 3-step process. You complete a request form so that NQA can understand your requirements. And then once you've done that, we will book you to contact you to book an assessment with your assessor. And the assessment consists of 2 visits for stage 1 and stage 2, for those in the know. And then we will, following the successful stage 2, a decision is made on certification. And much like the rest of the standards we have in place, 22301 follows that same path. So I mentioned earlier on in the presentation that there is a change from 2012 to 2019 standard. For those with a standard in place, whether that's your organization or some of your clients' organizations, here's an outline of the transition and what that means depending upon the maturity level of your BCMS. I think the key date there is April the 30th, 2021. Our certification bodies, such as NQA, must cease conducting initial and recertification audits to the 2012 version from next year. As such, all initial and recertification audits which occur after this date must be conducted against the 2019 revision. For those who don't have a standard, then you've got straight in at 2019. So before I let you go, we'll have a quick look at COVID Secure Guideline. So this is NQA's latest product, which gives all organizations the confidence that they can return to work. Okay, and the auditor, if you require this, the auditor will turn up and give a secure guideline verification that you followed government rules and you are okay to return to work. So please, if this is something you are interested, it's really beneficial to those who have had it, and the feedback given by clients who've implemented this is really good and available to review on the NQA webpage under COVID-19. So as promised, that was short and sweet. It's simply an introduction to 22301 with a very quick look at one of the most commonly asked questions in terms of technical aspects. As I mentioned, I'm happy to answer questions now. If there are questions which come further down the line, once you've got this webinar and the slide deck in front of you and you want to reach back, then either reach info at NQA there, or if you managed to get my email address earlier on in the slide deck, then please do email me direct. Okay. The implementation guide, I don't have a date. I know that's going to be one of the questions, but I don't have a date for when that's been released. It's been composed and checked as we speak, so it's not too far away. It will be on the website soon, and we'll certainly let you know when that's available. So thanks for joining us for this afternoon. I appreciate your time on a Friday. I will now look to any questions we've got and answer those before we leave. So one question from Neil: is there objective evidence to the extent which 22301 certified organisations have responded to the pandemic better than those without in terms of resilience? Yes, so organisations without 22301 have been able to demonstrate that they have responded in kind, if you like, and then generated a plan, but it's all very responsive, not well practiced, perhaps a little bit more expensive than and less considered than those who had 22301 or 27001 in place. There is a notable difference from an auditor's perspective, but in terms of objective evidence, is there a study which has been done? I can't point you at anything like that. I can only sort of convey my experience. Organisations have continued without, but simply put, they're less effective unless it was more unknown to them about what to do next. For example, switching from a communal workplace model to a virtual model, if that wasn't a preconceived plan, then it's been a painful experience for some people. They've still managed to do it, but ultimately it was more reactive than proactive. So the benefits of 22301 and 27001 elements for those who've only had that are definitely notable as an auditor, but yeah, I don't think I can point you in the direction of a study on a website where it says this is the case. So I've had a question for about what is the difference between a 22301 and 9001. So 9001 specifies quality management system and some of the requirements which are unique to 9001, such as gathering customer information and understanding the design requirements. For example, that's changed in 22301 a little bit. It's more about preparing your own organization. And as such, there is the operational area within 22301 differs Ultimately, though, the clause 4 to 7, and then clauses 9 and 10, if you understand 9001, then they're much of the same thing. It's all about the management of the management system there. It's just the operational requirements are a little different between 9 and 223. And Ronaldo asks, how can this be added to a 9001? So technically speaking, you cannot just bolt on business continuity to 9001. You need an entire different management system in place. But because of the common areas, as we've just discussed with the previous question, such as let's take leadership, for example. So leadership must resource a quality management system. Likewise, leadership must resource a business continuity management system and ensure that roles and responsibilities are outlined and communicated. So the requirements are the same there, regardless of the management system. So there is a lot of overlap. So you can integrate once you understand it well enough within your organization, quite a lot of that, but there is a specific different piece of work required for the business continuity management system to ensure that you've identified critical functions and resources required to keep them going when things go wrong. Bit of praise from Liz. Thank you, Liz. Colin asks, are there any specific requirements, guidance for BCP, BIA, DRP, risk register, etc.? Business impact analysis. Yes, there is. So, Colin, I think the kind of what you're getting at there is the implementation guide, which will be both a blog release as such and a webinar, hopefully, and that will outline some of the specific requirements. So I only very briefly had the opportunity to just touch on this when we looked at impact analysis and planning. And that didn't really give you specific requirements. It just gave you a flavour of what's required. What we need to do on the back of this, now that people understand, hopefully what it is a more technical look at, including tangible examples, so you have some things to think about, take away, but that will follow, we promise. David asked, what do businesses struggle with the most? I perhaps audited, a small percentage of a large number of organisations who use NQA for certification. The businesses I audit specifically do have some common problems in place when it comes to continuity, and that common problem is if you like, the lack of consideration about what they could keep going when times get rough. So when we need resilience in this organization, what do we need to do to keep things going? And until they were faced with the overwhelming problem of the COVID-19 pandemic, where not only their organization, but their partners, their suppliers, their vendors, their customers, the whole shebang, everybody was in the same boat. And yes, not everybody had a plan which accounted for a pandemic where everything closes, but simply those with a BCP in place before the pandemic struck had a understood channel of response, and it just made that life a little bit easier to overcome whatever problems it was. I think the most common problem, if you had to force me to make an answer, is I think the lack of understanding about what remote working means. Simply put, most people go to an office or to a warehouse or to a facility where they do what they do every day, and it's a communal model. Everybody goes there, and the response was either we have to socially distance now, so we can't do all of the things we need to do, or we have to move to a virtual model. And it's that lack of understanding about what that means and how do you recover from that in the future without, depleting all of your resources to meet an immediate needs. So that's why I think to answer your question, what do business struggle with the most? It's planning and understanding where they are in terms of readiness to respond. And Sarah asked, does the standard 22301 provide guidance on the amount of detail which is required in the plans? Yes, it does. So if you are familiar with ISO, you know about the shall, the woulds, the musts. It does tell you that in there. If you don't have it already, if you go onto the ISO website, there is available to everybody a free copy of the standard to review online. So if you haven't read it already, then I suggest going over to the ISO page where you can have a look at the PDF, which is supplied for free. Simply as a response to what's been happening in the world recently. Business continuity has been a hot topic, and ISO have taken the step of providing the standard for people to review. So rather than me go through where it does or doesn't outline detail, I would suggest just taking a quick look at the standard, and if there's anything which pops out you're not certain with, then please by all means come back at me with a question and I'll be happy to answer that. Okay. We've had another question. Oh, I missed one. I do apologise. I missed the question there. So from BD, doesn't want to leave his name, that's fair enough. So ISO 27001 requires BCP tests to be conducted for the client. Does 22301 also instruct the same? Yes. So yes, it does. Simply, there is, in ISO 27001, one of the Annex A controls of Clause 17 is to conduct verification activity to make sure that the plan you've generated is effective. And then once you've gone through that verification activity, it spits out improvements or things that you'd like to do better and efficiencies. And in the same way, within the operational Clause 8 of the 22301, there is a requirement to test and verify your standard, your business continuity plan, to make sure that it's sufficient. And yes, naturally, by doing that, you'll generate and churn out improvements which are required to be captured and fed back in. So when the cycle starts again, you have a better idea. But yeah, but constant verification is a feature of the new one as well. 22301 as well. So Anthony asks, is it a good idea to use 9001 processes as a basis for your business impact analysis? Yes. So yeah, if you've got 9001 in place, yeah, you hopefully have a series of flow processes to show how to achieve something, how to achieve a service, how to manufacture a product. Yes, that is a good basis to start with. What the 22301 standard requires you to do is put some data against that to look at what the impact of not being able to produce that is in terms of finances or reputation, for example. And then once you've got that data, then you need to look at resources to make sure you can keep that going in times of resilience, or if you can, that you are prepared for the costs involved with not being able to do that service delivery. So a really good point, actually. Yeah, really good, Anthony. Yeah, I would use, if I was implementing, for example, I would have a look at some of the processes in 9000 to perhaps point out what are critical business functions. So the standard, Christina, does give some guidance on those requirements, yes. So the process as outlined in the PDCA in the slide I provided, it does give you a guide on this. First we start with context, then we go, naturally, like all ISO standards does. And yeah, if you delve into the operational, so Clause 8 of 22301, there are some specific guidance in terms of what you must do and what you must achieve and what needs to be recorded, what needs to be considered. So again, if you have a quick peek at the ISO webpage, 22301 in the search bar, and it'll come up and you can have a quick look through that at your leisure. And if you've got any questions as a result of checking through the standard directly, then more than happy to answer them. Just checking back to make sure I've not missed any questions. I don't think I have. So Christine again, yeah, there will be, NQA will be, we're currently writing, when time permits, we're currently writing a guide which will give organizations a implementation guide. So you can open up the slide deck so you understand what's going on in terms of what it means to have 22301. And then the next logical step is to, once you've decided that yes, absolutely, business continuity is something we should consider, NQA will shortly be releasing a implementation guide. And that is more what I think you were getting at there. So yeah, and it will include some things such as an outline of the clause areas to make sure that you've covered everything. And if, for example, you've never seen clause 8 of 22301, it will go into more detail than I've been able to today to make sure that you understand that you're hitting all of the requirements, if you like. So yeah, there will be an implementation guide to follow. So I think we've kind of reached the end of the questions there. What I'm going to do is go back to just to make sure. I'm quite sure you can reach NQA just by looking at the website, but my personal email is not on there. So what I'll do is I'll go back to unhappily they put a picture of my face. There we go. My email address is on there, so yeah, quite happy for you to just reach into NQA, info@nqa.com, and ask any question you've got there. Clearly, if you're looking to implement this and you want a quote and to outline the requirement for your organization, then visit sales@NQA or info again at NQA, and we'll direct you from there. If you've got a technical question, once you've read the standard or you've reviewed this webinar about 22301, 27001, then my email address is on there. More than happy for you to reach me direct. I think that's it in terms of questions. Nothing else has come up since the last one about the implementation guide. So what I'll do is, for now, I will draw a close to this webinar. But as mentioned, you can see my details on screen there. You've had NQA's info@nqa.com. So if in the aftermath there's something which isn't quite sticking and you want more information, or you want a better guide on understanding, or whether it's right for you, a review of what benefits you could really see, just a chat about some of the pitfalls and like of not having this, then please do let me know. Okay, guys, that's it. Thank you very much for joining us. Hope you have a great weekend and a very safe and prosperous rest of 2020. I'll speak to you all again soon. Thanks, guys.